If you travel southbound by train to Ilkeston Station, you will see the Iron Giant. You might be thinking statue or some other monument, but the Iron Giant is a feat of railway engineering that's so big, its very size helps save it from its own destruction. Even though the Victorian railways were taking on more passengers year by year, coal transportation was still one of the most profitable assets the railway could move. These golden black nuggets also caused a few disagreements between railway companies. No company doesn't want another moving in on their patch, especially in the rich coal areas of the northwest area of Nottingham. The Midland Railway held the monopoly in this area, and other railways and companies were trying to move their freight frequently, called them aggressive in their business methods. Companies remembered all too well how the canal network would monopolise their network, and with it the pricing, and could see similarities between them and the Midland. One company, sick and tired of the Midland, was the Great Northern Railway. They had coal deep underground in their collieries in Yorkshire and were working tooth and nail to bring it up and move it. And thanks to the Midland, the area surrounding Nottingham was horrible to cross. The Midland had put into place a traffic sharing agreement, and the Great Northern was forced to pay heavy tolls to cross it. Given it was the quickest way to reach the southern counties, the Great Northern had no choice but to commit. The Great Northern hated this agreement. Not only was it taking money from their own pockets, the Midland was free to put up their tolls with no objections. The railway had had enough, and in 1862 attempted to put in their own line from Cardiff to Condor Park. The Butterley Ironworks was close by and would have been quite profitable and useful. However, the Midland offered a counter-management agreement, which the GNR accepted. But the Midland had other plans. The GNR had a main line to London, and like with any other traffic management agreement, agreed with other railways for tolls to be paid when other railways used it. But when the Midland decided to build its own line to London, the GNR were furious. They ended the agreement in Nottingham, and the two railways competed in a rate war and became bitter rivals. In the end, the Midland barred the GNR from running any of its coal services in the Nottingham area. The Great Northern was not going to take this lying down. They knew that this exclusion could impact their profits, so they decided to relook at the idea of going back into Nottingham themselves. The Midland, realising what the GNR were doing, desperately offered their new management tariffs, hoping it would save their monopoly, but the GNR were through playing games and pushed through with their line. The line, though, was not going to be easy. The valley between Aylesworth in Nottinghamshire and Ilkeston in Derbyshire was fairly flat at the base, but it were boggy and littered with uncharted mine shafts. Chief Engineer Richard Johnson knew this was going to be a problem, as the conventional stone viaduct would not work and would easily collapse. He had held the position of Chief Engineer for many years and was well experienced, so he put his resident engineer Samuel Abbott on the case. Samuel Abbott was a local lad, having been born not far from the proposed viaduct. The posting was his first major employment, and he worked up the ranks to one of the main engineering residents, and one that Johnson could trust with complicated projects such as this. Knowing that stone was out of the question, Abbott had to turn to another material to make his bridge, and thanks to an inspiration from France, decided to make a viaduct out of wrought iron. Wrought iron is a highly refined iron that has been processed either by hammering or rolling to remove any excess slag. Some slag, around 2%, is left inside the iron, which gives the material extra protection from corrosion. Using wrought iron on bridges was becoming popular in the Victorian era, and it was lighter than their stone counterparts. To help give the bridge even more strength, Abbott turned to a Warren truss design. Warren trusses uses one of the most strongest shapes in nature, the triangle. Equilateral triangles are placed along the truss, which allowed the structure to alternate between compression and tension on the diagonal girders. As less material was required, it also made the whole structure even lighter. Each of the 15 identical piers would sit on a concrete base and stand at a height of 56 feet. To allow for flexibility and expansion on the piers, they were not bolted in. Instead, they're held in place by bricks, and walls were built up around them to keep them stable. Each pier supports the bridge deck. The bridge deck is 433 metres total, separated into 16 23-metre spans. Each span has 4 3.4 metre girders, which were designed in the Warren Truss design and was built deep for rigidity. The top held the track bed. The track bed was different to other bridges. Ordinarily, the tracks would be fixed to the bridge. However, in this case, they were not. A layer of ballast lay in between the rails and the bridge deck, with the rails and the sleepers nestled within. Construction began in 1876 and opened in 1877. It had an ordinary life as viaducts go, and over time, when the railways merged, it became a large part of the landscape, ferrying passengers and freight. The only real time it was ever really in the papers as a working railway was during the First World War, where it suffered a near miss from a Zeppelin airship. The bridge still bears the scars from that night after a shrapnel hit. In the 1960s, British Rail was a bit of a mess, and the tangled mass of railways around Nottinghamshire was just too complicated, so it was decided that the extension be removed, and by 1968 the beaching cut sealed its fate. The rails were taken up and the embankments were demolished. But the viaduct remained as a testament to the old line. A contractor was brought in to demolish the viaduct, but when they looked at the structure, it was so large and well built that simply cutting it up was impossible. If they wanted to destroy it, it would have had to have been taken apart piece by piece. The Iron Giant slept for decades, and it was left in a derelict state, and no one really knew what to do with it. That was until 2022, when the Friends of the Bennerly Viaduct took over its ownership. Their work focuses on the preservation on the viaduct to make it into a walking haven. They hope that walkers and cyclists would enjoy the spectacular views from the bridge deck. They also have agreements with the landowners that own underneath the viaduct and are in the process of turning that land into a splendid wildlife sanctuary. Work on the project is progressing. You can only access the viaduct via the west end, as the eastern end is closed for a new accessible ramp to be fitted. They have erected paths around the nature reserve so the public can go through this area without disturbing the local wildlife. The bridge is slowly coming back to life with a new goal: to provide both history and recreation for its community. It is only one of 2 iron bridges still standing, and the longest one in Britain. Although it's never going to see another train again, its story and the fact its being was only because 2 companies didn't get along, it's fascinating.